Hello and welcome back to Great Scot Gamers. My name's Dave,
My name's Mark.
and today we're doing something a little bit different.
Are we?
Yeah,
We're not playing games?
we're not playing games. We're talking about games. We're gonna do our top five games of all time. So I'm gonna do my top five. Mark's gonna do his top five, and we can compare them and contrast and see who's got the best top five video games of all time.
How are we going to decide who has the best top five video games in
Well,
all
that's
time?
for the viewers to decide. They're gonna leave. They can leave us in the comments some comment.
They can leave us in the
They can leave
comments?
us in the comments. Leave us on red in the comments and let us know what they think about our top five videos.
Leave us in the comments.
Leave us in the comments. Okay, so number five for me is a game that we've played fairly recently on the channel. It's the newest game on my list, and it's Horizon Zero Dawn.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's definitely one of my top five. That's why it's on the top five list, you know.
Oh,
And but I just love the game. It's such an amazing adventure. It's my favorite game on the PS4. It was I think my first experience of like really good motion capture, facial recognition. Like I think we've talked about this before when we were playing it on the channel, but like I thought the facial expressions on all the characters were really realistic, and it really added to like the dialogue and made you feel like the characters were more real. But I just loved the gameplay as well. It's just so satisfying to take massive robots down with a little bow and arrow with explosives on it. I think the concept is brilliant. It takes you back to like, prehistoric time when the dinosaurs roamed, but they're not dinosaurs, they're robots. And I think the story arc is really cool where you start off like not really knowing very much and you just think you're just this outcast, but it kind of builds up and reveals why the robots are there and like all this sort of post-apocalyptic uh, environment that you find yourself in. I got lost in that game. I absolutely loved it.
oh, I can see that.
What were your thoughts on it?
Yeah, I really enjoyed it myself as well. Um, I think that I only played it fairly recently, as you know.
Yeah,
The first one
that's
as
right.
well, the one
Yeah,
that I take it's the first one.
yeah. Zero Dawn.
Yeah, I'd agree with you. The story was really kind of compelling. It was unique. There was a lot to do. Even the side quests were quite intriguing. The characters were likable. The facial recognition, as you said, was pretty spot on,
Yeah,
especially for its time.
yep,
And yeah, even today, like I was saying when we were doing our video, that it looks beautiful. It stands the test of time even today.
yep.
And yeah, that's a testament to the game itself.
Absolutely. I think it really showed off the power of the PS4, and they've captured that again in Forbidden West
Mhm.
for the PS5 console. But just that sort of first go at it in Zero Dawn. And I probably should have said, and I think most people know this of me by now, but I really like female characters, especially like female lead characters in games. I've always been drawn to them. And like even in games like Streets of Rage, I always pick Blaze.
Oh, I know. I
Yeah, I
know.
mean we know that, right?
Like
So
literally before the fucking screen like shows up for the characters,
yeah,
you can hear the sound. You
here
get the sound of you picking
you
Blaze.
can the ladies.
Uh,
But I mean, I think Aloy's such a likable character in the first game. I think she's strong and independent and doesn't really fall into the usual category of oh she's just pretty looking and stuff. Like she's attractive, but not in a over the top kind of way.
mhm.
Just in a general video game character kind of way. And I just think she really fits the bill for that game. I think she's really strong, but not in a stupid macho guy kind of way,
Yeah.
which I just don't really resonate with as much as I do with female characters. But yeah, that's my number five. So what's yours?
So my number five is actually a game that I think you enjoyed as well.
Hmm.
Near.
Oh
Um,
yeah,
I don't want to say the second word because I can't pronounce it.
Automata.
Well, it's either that or it's Automata, and I've heard it
Right.
both
Okay.
ways.
Okay. So right.
So yeah, Nier. The first thing that struck me about Nier was the music because it's the
Yeah.
first thing you hear, the first thing that you're like, "Wow, this is awesome." It's very kind of climactic. I think's the right word for
Hmm.
that kind of music. And then that's before you even get into the combat. I feel like Nier. You can do a lot of kind of flashy things, like whenever you dodge something and time kind of slows down a little bit. It just feels really nice. You can do a lot of kind of flashy combos, and It's just really fun to play, but and that's not really all with it. It's a really nice like a lot of people kind of crap on it because they're like, oh, it doesn't look all that nice, but it's supposed to be like a kind of wasteland and stuff.
Yeah.
And well, when you're in the kind of sandy areas, and when you're in the forest, it's supposed to be like buildings and stuff, like covered in moss and such. And I feel like it's got a really nice aesthetic. Um, yeah, it's really good, and I like the story as well.
Hmm.
The fact it kind of goes over like multiple characters,
Yes.
and then you get like the final story as well.
Yep.
Um, it's one that every time you play, I feel like you kind of learn something new about it.
Yep.
Um, Even if you just play the same ending again, you see something you never seen previously, or you think about something you never thought of previously. So yeah, I'd say that's probably number five on my list because it's probably one of the most enjoyable games that I've played in my lifetime, and considering how new it is compared to most of the games that I like, I think that's high praise.
Yeah, definitely. I would agree. I really enjoyed the game as well. I think it's really good fun. It's quite challenging, especially in the beginning stages. I personally found it quite challenging to play, because of the kind of game it is. It's almost like a Souls-like, but not maybe not as quite as brutal as that. Because obviously you get your upgrades and stuff, you get more powerful as time goes on.
Was it yourself I spoke to where you said yeah you didn't actually know there were upgrades till a certain point in the game?
No,
Because I also didn't know that, and I played through quite a lot of the game with no upgrades.
Hmm.
And then I realised why I was taking a couple of attempts to get through some parts
Mhm.
because I had no chips in
Ah,
at all.
okay, right,
I had
okay.
no chips in at all.
Wow, that would make it harder.
No modifications on my pod either. So
Yeah,
yeah, it was
a bad time.
yeah. Because I think how I found it out was I was just going around the NPCs. And they
Right.
were like, I'd been to this one before, but I was like, "What's buy chips? No, I don't want chips.
I don't need chips.
I'm not spending my money that I need to buy potions and stuff, or
Yeah,
whatever
yeah,
the
yeah,
equivalent for potions
yeah.
was." So I was like, no, I didn't buy potions chips even because I didn't realize how
Mm,
important they were. And then there was like one point later on in the game where I was like, oh, I'll buy a couple because there's like it seems like they might be useful.
yeah,
And then once I worked out how to use them, I was just unstoppable because
yeah. They just upgrade you so much. Absolutely. I agree that the gameplay is so much fun, like the actual like combat, the swordplay. I would say though, my personal opinion, I'm not a big fan of bullet hell, and I felt like that was to its detriment. I think if it didn't have that in it,
see,
it would be better. But that's a
I,
personal opinion.
I can kind of understand that, but at the same point, I feel like it didn't have a huge amount of bullet hell in it.
The
Um,
opening section is entirely bullet hell,
Yeah, but it's like
and every
five
boss
minutes.
does it
Yeah, it's like 5 minutes bullet hell though.
exactly.
I mean, yeah. So you could argue that bullet hell is like what you get in the opening section where you're flying about. That is typical bullet hell.
Yeah,
I think what you're thinking of as well is even when you're like on the action sequences, you have to dodge the balls.
yeah.
But
Dodge those
I would
balls.
argue that isn't really bullet hell because it's not as fast paced and you
Mm,
can dodge them a lot more easily. To be honest,
yeah, and if you can dodge a wrench, you can dodge a
if
ball.
you can dodge a wrench, you can dodge a ball. Yeah,
Absolutely.
exactly.
No, I get it. Yeah, it's just a personal opinion, but I agree. It's a fantastic game, and it looks amazing. And again, strong female character.
Yeah. Seeing a theme here.
Brilliant. Okay, so now on to number four. So this we're going much further back in time now. So Horizon Zero Dawn is not my number five. Is the most modern game on my list. And going much farther back to when I was but a wee lad, my number four is Link's Awakening, specifically the DX version of the game,
Mm.
and that was the Game Boy Color version. So Link's Awakening is the very first Zelda game I ever played. It opened my world up to adventure games and the Legend of Zelda in general, and I just fell in love. It was one of the most enjoyable games I've ever played. I just remember even from the opening cutscene, where you're like stranded. I think you're on a boat or you're stranded on like a raft, and then it crashes into the beach, and then that's where you start and you meet Marin or whatever. I can't remember. Is that her name, Marin? And then this adventure just begins, and I think you just start off with a shield, or does she give you the shield, or you pick up the
I
shield on
think,
the beach or something like that?
yeah, I think you do start off with a shield. I don't think you have a sword.
That's right. You have to find it, and it's
Yeah.
it's just that you have to find everything. I lots of Zelda games have moved on since then, and like most of them, you start off with the sword or the shield, or whatever. But in this one, you just started out with nothing and you have to build up. What's also interesting about that is because you could assign your equipment to the A and B buttons. I assigned the sword to the A button, and that meant that I didn't know that Link was left-handed until I played any of the other games.
Ah,
Because obviously, like you can, if you can assign the buttons, then you can assign it to whichever one you want. And if you assign it to A, he swings with his right hand.
yeah.
And so I just didn't know. So I think that's a quite a cool little thing. Like I didn't figure out. But one of the most enjoyable things about the Link's Awakening and Zelda games in general, but I think it's really quite prevalent in Link's Awakening is what I call the long quest. So that's where you might remember where you get an item really near the beginning of the game, and I can't remember exactly what the item is, but you get an item at the beginning of the game that you have to trade to someone,
Mm-hmm.
and you don't know who it is, and you don't find out until you meet that person,
Mm-hmm.
and then you meet them and you trade them this item that you have, and they go, oh, you've got that item, that's what I'm looking for. Here, have this, and they trade you something else.
Oh, I remember
Yeah.
this.
So, and throughout the entire game, there's this long trading quest where you're constantly giving them items and items and items, and you're swapping over. I think at one point you get to control, or you get in your possession a chain chomp,
Uh huh.
which was a nod to Mario,
Yes.
because obviously, like it's a Nintendo game, and I think the creator of Mario is also the creator of Zelda. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah, so like nods to each other there. But I just thought that was really cool, and like you're constantly trading these items to get new things. I'm not even sure what you get at the end. I'm not even sure if I did it.
I think I did, but I can't remember what it was for the
Yeah,
life of
I'll need
me.
to look that up to include it in the video, but I don't remember what the item is. But I just thought that was really cool how
Mm.
there's this, and it gave me this sense of wonder whenever you met the next thing, the next person that needed that item. You're like you would never know until you got there. I think
Yeah.
early on you have to trade for like a potion at the witch's den or something like that, and one of the items you get is a potion or something like that. But
Yeah.
I just found it utterly wonderful to explore the world, and the bosses were all brilliant. Typical Zelda game, finding finding new items in dungeons and using it on the bosses and stuff. And it had the I always remember the first boss is the little wormy guy, which you have to
Oh, yeah.
constantly attack his tail. I think he's quite a trope now.
Pretty sure he's the first boss in Link to the Past as well,
I
if I'm
think
not
you're right.
mistaken.
Yeah, I think you're right. It became kind of a common theme, especially in the Game Boy versions of the game. But that always just sticks out. And
Because he's the one that if you get knocked down to the floor, you
yeah,
need
you
to
have
go
to
back
start
up
again.
again.
Yeah, I know. And things like the Rock's Feather, which you can use to jump over blocks and stuff, which never really became a thing in the 3D Zeldas because
You didn't need
you
to.
didn't need it exactly. So like that's something very specific about the Game Boy, the top-down versions of Zelda. It was wonderful. It's such a delightful game to play, and it's was my entry into one of my favorite game series. So that's why it's my number four.
That's understandable. My entry was A Link to the Past, so
Oh, really?
yeah.
Brilliant. Well, you could talk about that.
Yeah, I would, but I don't think it's actually on my list.
Oh, sorry. I thought you meant your number four was A Link to the
No,
Past.
no, no. My number four is Castlevania Symphony of the Night.
Mm.
Again, I think there's something about the music in games that really gets me, and Castlevania Symphony of the Night has one of the best soundtracks in a video game that I've ever heard. Um, the very start of the game is just like metal guitars and um, you're playing as Richter, you're walking up the stairs trying to confront Dracula, um, and that's not even the main game. Like that's basically a scene from the last game, and even that portion of the game is amazing. And it like then when you get the intro with Alucard, it's again metal guitars, and you're walking through the castle, and it feels so awesome. Platformer with RPG elements, like I would say the progression in that game, the exploration in that game is second to very few other games. There's games that have been like it that felt like it, games like Hollow Knight. But I always come back to Castlevania. I think it stands the test of time graphically as well. It still looks good because it's basically the sprites and everything are designed in a specific way. It's fun to actually find new areas. You want to unlock like 200% of the castle. You don't want to just leave like leave bits unexplored. It's like Metroid that way.
Mhm.
You see a wee gap, a wee door, you want to explore it.
Yep.
Um, Story wise, like Castlevania never usually is really about the story, but I think as far as Castlevania games go, Symphony of the Night actually has a pretty strong story.
Cool.
Um, yeah, I can't praise it enough. You get to use a variety of different weapons in it, from swords to knuckle dusters to clubs, I think, as
Hmm.
well. Um, so yeah, there's a lot of ways that you can kind of tailor how you play through that game. But no matter how you play through the game, it's just really, really enjoyable. And if you choose to go down the inverted castle route, like if you don't just go through the main castle and get the first ending, and if you get the secret ending, it's basically a whole other game. Like it's the same castle but turned upside down, and with harder monsters and different music.
All right, that's cool.
So
Didn't know.
yeah, if you've never done the inverted castle, I would recommend giving it a visit because yeah, it's really cool too.
Sweet. Yeah, I've not played much of the Castlevania games. I have to say, I've played a wee bit of some of the earlier ones, and I think we played Symphony of the Night on the channel.
Yeah,
So I'm not as familiar with it as you are, but I would agree that especially the what I've played of Symphony of the Night, the beginning section is amazing. I just remember the bit where Alucard comes sliding into the room and starts
yeah,
slicing up the wolves and stuff. He's such a cool character, so satisfying to play as.
he is.
And yeah, I think you're right. The music's brilliant. It's probably the quintessential Metroidvania, and the Vania part comes from Castlevania.
Yeah.
It is one of those the staples in that genre. Um,
I would say as well, like another thing that I'd want to point out on it is you come into the castle with all your equipment, super overpowered because of your equipment, and then you get to like maybe 5 minutes in when you're like just cutting down wolves and just progressing through, and death mugs you because
yeah, because he's a dick.
yeah, and then you're running about with just your fists.
That's right.
So you
Yeah,
have to build everything back up from scratch, and it's like you then get to look forward to how powerful you will eventually be
yeah,
because you've seen how powerful that you are at the start of the game.
yeah,
But that's even before you level up, though. Like you're level one with that equipment, so imagine being like level 100,
yeah,
say, with that equipment.
yeah. That's pretty cool.
So yeah, it's awesome.
That's a cool idea. That's a cool way of like making a really powerful character start from zero.
Yeah,
Like because you have to start from zero at the beginning of the game, otherwise it's not fun. So
yeah.
that's cool. Next one. Okay, so on to number three. So my number three, we're moving on to a bit further in time. We're on to the PS2. And my number three is Metal Gear Solid 3, specifically the Subsistence version of the game. And the reason for that is because the original version, Metal Gear Solid 3 Snake Eater, was it had the same camera angle
Hmm.
as in Metal Gear Solid 2, where it was fixed. So every time you went to a new section, the camera was in a specific position, and that meant that you had to like maneuver yourself and hide from enemies
Hmm.
based on that perspective. But I felt like when they made with the Subsistence, they sort of it wasn't a remaster, but it was a re-release. They always released like a second version that had like extra stuff in the
Hmm.
game. And one of the changes they made to MGS3 was that you had a free moving camera, and I think that just instantly made the game so much better. It gave you so much more control. You could see in different locations. There were different approaches to things. It meant you could approach different missions in different ways. But yeah, to go into it a wee bit more in depth, Metal Gear Solid 3 is like the quintessential Metal Gear Solid for me. It's the highlight of the series. It is the story of Big Boss instead of Solid Snake. So I just find Big Boss to be a much cooler character. Although Solid Snake, he's a stoic kind of non-character almost because that's kind of how he was created. He was created to
Hmm.
be a soldier. He's not. He's not really a human in that way. Because he's been engineered to be a killing machine. Big Boss is human. He is where the genes for Solid Snake came from. He is the ultimate soldier. And because it's set during the Cold War, it is also the ultimate stealth espionage type situation where the Americans and the Russians are at war, but through stealth and espionage rather than all out kind of warfare that you see in the Call of Duty games and stuff. And I just found that a really cool setting for the game, especially because I think Hideo Kojima himself, and I think they put it into one of the codec things in MGS3 itself. The conversation that Snake has with um, Major Zero
Hmm.
is that they talk about James Bond, and apparently Big Boss was based off of James Bond in some way.
Ah,
He's like the American version, so like
yeah.
he's just this suave kind of cool. I mean, he's not suave and cool in the way that James Bond is. He's just kind of like cool.
Hmm.
He's like more gritty, and he's just like he smokes a cigar. He's got long hair. He's got an eye patch. Like he's cool. He's really cool, and I just I found the stealth took a huge leap in the third game because you had the camouflage option.
Yeah.
So in the second game and the first game, it was all about hiding in cupboards and lockers and behind corners and stuff and like patrol routes. Whereas in MGS3, it was much more living, it was much more alive. There were guards posted in certain locations and certain things would happen, but you had different locations you could hide in. You could hide in the grass, you could hide in the mud, you could hide up against a tree, and you could change your camouflage to make yourself pretty much invisible in those situations, and then you could use that to your advantage. I just found that so much better in terms of the stealth and like finding your way through the game. The boss fights are some of the best bosses in the series. My standout boss in that game is the end, the sniper rifle, who he basically just camps out and shoots you if you bother to poke your head out of the grass. And what's really cool about that boss fight is there's multiple ways to kill him.
Hmm.
You can fight him. You can like snipe him from where he is. You can run up behind him and like hold him up and like steal his dog tags and all that sort of stuff from the Metal Gear series that you're familiar with. But you can also save the game, turn the game off, wait a week, and he'll die of old age. And I think that's really, really funny. It's such a weird, it's just a Hideo Kojima thing to do. Incidentally, if you only turn the game off and if you come back, if you come back after one day, nothing happens. If you come back after 2 days, you get killed because he finds you.
Uh-huh.
And if you come back within that period, I'm not really sure what happens, but there's different things that happen depending on how long you take.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, I thought that was really cool, and it's just like the sort of the rivalry between Big Boss and the Boss is just I find it just so cool. The CQC mechanics as well were so satisfying to disarm enemies and like hold them up. It was just a new way of playing the game that wasn't in the first two, and it's just yeah, just a standout. The series went from strength to strength from there in terms of like um, options to play it.
Yeah.
Like the variety of just the power of the consoles and stuff. But NGS3 really stands out for me as
Hmm.
the best story, the best gameplay, and just like took it to a new level. I just love it.
I can kind of understand the appeal. Just quickly adding on to what you said, it's not one of my best games of all time, but the first one, just with unique things where the Psychomantis read your memory card for Castlevania, actually, because it's a Konami game
That's right.
and other games as well,
Yeah.
and would tell you, "Oh, I see you like Castlevania,"
Hmm.
and then the way to beat Psychomantis was to change your controller from the first port to the second one.
That's right.
And that's such a crazy thing to do.
Yep.
And I didn't know how to beat him.
Yes.
And I was talking to my brother about it, and he's like, "Oh, change your controller into the other port." And I was like, "You're lying. You're not, like, why would you think that's a thing?
Yeah.
Why would you think that's a thing?"
Uh-huh.
But lo and behold, I did it, and he's like, "I can't read you."
Yes.
So
It's so yeah.
yeah,
Hideo Kojima is a genius when it comes to that kind of thing.
yeah. Like as I say, for I can definitely understand like you liking specific elements because of that, like the whole that sniper dying in a week or finding you depending on what you're doing. That just reeks of that kind of thing.
Yeah. I
Um,
would say though that the Shagohod is probably the worst name for a Metal Gear in the series. I just I don't know why they've gone for that, but
I never actually played Metal Gear 3, so I don't
Oh,
really.
really? Okay, well there you go.
I do have it, I just haven't played it.
The Shagohod. Oh, you need to play it, man. It's the best.
I was playing through 2 and I didn't finish it, so.
Oh, right. So what's your number three?
Okay, so my number 3 is one that you know pretty well, Pokemon Silver.
Oh, excellent.
The reason, so I used to be a Pokemon Blue faithful,
Yes.
even like back in the day when I used to talk to you about it.
Mm.
But somebody made the argument, and I can't remember if it was yourself, that Pokemon Silver is basically 2 games in one.
Yep.
So if you play through the entirety of Pokemon Silver, you can go back and play through the original region
Yes.
and in its entirety,
Yep.
and fight all the gym leaders as well. Um, and all the old music's in there, and you can catch old Pokemon in that area as well. So you're basically getting 2 games in one. And I don't know of any other Game Boy game that's successfully done something like that. and I don't know of any other Pokemon game after that that's done something like that either. So I feel like Pokemon Silver. I used to play my Game Boy nearly constantly. I'd have like my team of original Pokemon from the original, from basically the starters from the original. So Squirtle, and then like a bunch of other Pokemon from the original as well. But
Yeah,
um, Silver's music was really good. The graphics were a wee bit upscaled from the first game. They had made so many quality of life improvements as well. I think they'd introduced a few new types on that one as well. That was the
yeah,
first time they introduced new types.
yep,
You had your legendary dogs in that one, was it?
yes.
Yeah. So yeah, it was really challenging to catch a legendary dog. I don't know if you remember.
Oh,
Basically,
I
they would
remember.
spawn in different parts of the map,
Yep,
but it was something unique to a Pokemon game they hadn't done before. Because normally, legendary Pokemon would be in a fixed area,
that's right.
but you had to go out and seek these Pokemon. So the best way to do it was to fly into an area and fly back, or like go between routes,
That's
and
right.
then you'd be able to eventually like corner it.
Yes,
And you'd do so much damage and it would run away. The trick was to get its health down, because if you got it down, the next time you encountered it, it would be the same health.
that's right.
Um, so yeah, Pokemon Silver. There's the thing about Pokemon games is there's always a kind of loose story in the background. It's not really about the story, I would say.
Hmm.
It's kind of a trope where you're going through all the gyms, getting the badges, building up your Pokemon, so that you can fight other people and like that you know in real life as well.
Yes.
But on top of that, like just beating the game, unlocking the old areas,
Hmm.
getting all that nostalgia from the old areas, and then the last boss of Pokemon Silver, the secret last boss, is basically you from the last game, but also Ash.
That's right. Yes.
But it's red, from the first game. So you're fighting yourself with like a remix of the old music,
Yes.
and that to me is just super climactic as well.
Yeah.
And I'm using that word a lot because these are the top five games.
Yeah. Well, of all time.
Um, and I remember going up I can't remember what it was called, but like that area. With all the really strong Pokemon, and I'm like, what the heck's gonna? Because I didn't have it spoiled for me or anything.
Right.
So what's going to be the end of this? Am I going to get a legendary Pokemon? There's a lot of caves here. Am I going to get a Master Ball or something?
Yeah.
No, I'm going to get my ass handed to me by
Yeah.
a fucking Pikachu.
Well, level 60 Pikachu or whatever it was. Lovely.
Yeah. Oh, I think it was level 90
Yeah, it
something.
might have been actually. I think it was.
And your Pokemon at that point weren't that, like, if you just went up there for the first time, they were not that high.
No. No,
And
absolutely.
they would struggle with just the standard Pokemon.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was just that game actually absolutely blew me away when it came out. I, for some reason, thought that I liked Blue better, for a little bit of time, but then I went back and played Silver, and I'm like, no, that like, why would I prefer half of a game
Yeah.
when I can have two games?
Yeah.
It's but yeah, Pokemon Silver definitely. I could just as easily say Gold, but I always go for the blue version.
Yeah, I'm the same. You know, Pokemon Blue nearly made my list,
Hmm.
so I can understand why you're saying that. I think because we started Pokemon from the beginning, I think the nostalgia for the first game in the series is definitely there. It's a strong,
Yeah.
a strong kind of childhood moment. But I agree that and even if it's just in terms of value for money, the
Hmm.
gold and silver and in Crystal even as well, with the extra quests and stuff you get in Crystal,
Yeah.
were better value for money because, as you say, there were practically two games in one. It was
Yes.
just so much bigger, so much more to do, and I feel like that was the generation just before it started to get a little silly with how
Hmm.
many you had to catch. You
Yes.
know,
Yeah. It's not even that. Like some of the designs after that were a bit.
well, that's a constant debate in the Pokemon universe. Is like you know Gen Oneers don't like the new ones, and the new guys don't like the old ones and stuff like that. So that's always going to be a debate. But
I mean, I can understand that, because even when I was, even in the past when the second gen came out, I was like, no, there's only 150
yeah,
Pokemon,
yeah.
mate. There's only
There's
150.
only
Maybe 151 if you count me, but
yeah, yeah, I mean, that's right.
150 Pokemon.
Yeah, totally. But yeah, that's a good pick. Right, so this became much more difficult towards the top two. There was a period of time where these two swapped places, but I since revised it, and so
Oh, this is going to be a survival horror, isn't it? Was it Resident
yeah,
Evil?
absolutely.
Oh,
My number two, sticking with the PS2, is Kingdom Hearts 2. This was such an amazing game when it came out. I think a lot of the games on my list, especially the kind of older ones, because they came out at a time in my life where I was playing a lot of games. I was still a young boy in my high school days, navigating life and learning about stuff. I think these games came along at the right time where I was just invested in them. But Kingdom Hearts 2 was such a an all rounder for me. It marries together the writing of Disney and Square Enix, which are two of the biggest, most successful story writers I think in the world. You can't argue that Disney writes amazing stories and Square Enix write amazing stories. So the two of them coming together to write a story for a game just really, really works so well. The fact that you're crossing Final Fantasy characters with Disney characters, you're playing a an action RPG, which, funnily enough, I think that Kingdom Hearts is, especially Kingdom Hearts 2, is like an example of how to do action RPGs correctly.
Hmm.
I think, we've talked about how Final Fantasy games have moved into the action RPG genre, and we're not so keen on that.
Hmm.
I feel like Kingdom Hearts did it right, and it should, that's an example of how action RPGs can be good.
Yeah.
Kingdom Hearts 2 had so many more advancements in the gameplay that added on to the Kingdom Hearts 1. Kingdom Hearts 1 was such a good story, but if you go back and play it now, it's a little bit clunky because not all of the quality of life improvements are there. Whereas in Kingdom Hearts 2, the fluidity of combat and the way you can move around and dodge and jump and dash in the air, once you unlocked all these upgrades, combat just flowed so well. It was so satisfying to play. It was fun. It could be very challenging at times, specifically things like the harder bosses, and you'll know yourself. Sephiroth makes an appearance as probably the hardest boss in the game. I never beat him, but I know people who did, and he's so difficult to play even if you're max level with all the best stuff.
Yeah.
So like it wasn't an easy game to play, but it was so much fun. The story, like I say, is incredible. You get to visit all these worlds, and I mean it's cheesy, right? Because it's I was going to say it's Kingdom Hearts. It's a Disney world, so it's got this kind of cheesy, childish thing to it, but it's also kind of got the Final Fantasy aspect where it's like a bit more serious and like it's I don't know. It's kind of it's a cross between the two, and and obviously Donald and Goofy just really rounding out the main team. They're just fantastic characters. Um, I just fell in love with that game so much, and it was and the music as well. The soundtrack, particularly for like the end credits music, will always resonate with me. It's such a I remember getting quite emotional at the end of that game, just having finished it, and just it was such a fun game, especially the going back to the sort of the Disney thing, they managed to get quite a lot of the original voice actors for the characters, which I thought was amazing.
Yeah.
Some of the other games in the series they haven't been able to do that, and Kingdom Hearts 2 really nailed it. The voice actors were really really good for all the characters that were in it, and yeah, I just fucking love that game, man. It's so good. The highlight of the series for me. There's been so many weird and wonderful versions of the game or in the series, but I think Kingdom Hearts 2 was the best one.
I would definitely agree with you on that. I think Kingdom Hearts 2 was definitely the best Kingdom Hearts game. Um, I would pretty much agree with everything you said. Um, I think my appeal to that game, or what, like one of my main appeal points was like you were always excited to see what world you were going to next
Yep.
because you always recognised it, like whether it was a world that was dear to you because you that was one of your favorite Disney movies back in the day,
Yeah.
or whether it was one that somebody else that is their favorite. I have probably seen most of the Disney movies, or all the Disney movies really, from the Kingdom Hearts games at least.
Yep.
And yeah, it was a fantastic time. So I would definitely agree. I can see why that's on your top five. It was one I thought about, but didn't pick as well. But it was very close to being slotted into.
Nice. Yeah, that was always the risk with this is that we've got very similar tastes, but I'm very surprised, and it's good that so far we haven't had any doublers. So, but yeah, we do have similar tastes, and yeah, just such a fantastic game. So, what's your number two?
Well,
It's kind of no.
no, actually, my number two is a game called Phantasy Star Online.
Okay, cool.
for the Dreamcast,
Nice.
going back then. So I spent many, many hours in my school days playing Phantasy Star Online, to the point where maybe my schoolwork suffered a wee bit as a result.
At least you can be
Um,
honest about it.
I remember there was a point where my exams were coming up, and my mum said, "You need to go to bed because you've got your exams in the morning." And I went up the stairs, and as soon as she fell asleep, went back down and played some Phantasy Star Online.
Oh, the cat's out of the
Um,
bag now.
yeah, I mean, yeah, but she knows what I'm like. So,
Yeah, that's fair.
but Phantasy Star Online, it's a Sega game
Yeah.
basically. And it's based off of the old Phantasy Star games, in the way that there's a lot of kind of recurring characters. I don't think they're the same characters, but they're named the same. So you've got like Biggs and Wedge in Final Fantasy. You've got Ney in Phantasy Star, and then you've got I don't know if Karik's a recurring character, but he's like one of the main characters as well. And Phantasy Star Online, it had like the first version of the game had four stages. It was like forests, caves, mines, and ruins. And you would go through with a party of four. You could be like a mage, a ranger, which is somebody that uses guns, or you could be like a hunter, that's somebody that uses swords. Um, and mages could heal people as well, depending on what kind of mage you were. So yeah, you would play through the level, basically fending off tons of enemies, and you get to the end where there'd be like a boss, a zone boss. It would always be like something big, like a dragon, a giant robot, a demon at the very end as well, and just working together cooperatively because it was quite a challenging game. It's not, I would say, it's kind of more challenging than a lot of the games these days. Um, and its simplicity, like the simplicity of the game itself, is what made it challenging because you had to make sure that you were avoiding things. You had like a three-hit combo, or if you were a mage, you had to manage your mana, and it would go up really slowly, or you could use like MP potions to get up faster. But if you ran out of mana, you would have to wait a good while if you had no MP potions to get mana back. Um, so yeah, I did really enjoy the challenge. The music was amazing, but also that game had one of the best selection of side quests in any online game that I played. There was an overarching story where you could follow the story through all the side quests. Like you would do a side quest that would involve two characters, and they'd be like, "Oh yeah, thanks for doing that quest with us." Blah blah blah. You'd do a few more quests that weren't related to it, and then you would go back to a quest with those characters in it again. But just a kind of spoiler alert. One of the characters idolizes another character, but that character then ends up killing him later on in a quest. And then you're like, why did he do that?
Yeah. Why have you
Um,
done this?
so you end up actually picking up his weapon at one point as well. It's like a kind of Darth Maul style blade, um, and going after him.
Mm,
And you can also kill him and get his weapon, which is a scythe.
nice.
But yeah, the robot basically, he starts off as this really good guy, and then he turns into like a murderous, like, I don't know why, but he seems to go crazy.
Right.
And you're hunting him through all these levels. And if you go through the complete quest, you get his scythe, which is one of the best weapons in the game. And there's other quests like that as well. There's a quest line where you can get a frying pan as a weapon as well. And when you hit monsters, it's like dunk, dunk.
Nice.
It's pretty awesome. It's really powerful too. Um, but yeah, I spent so many hours playing that game, and I would have said Phantasy Star Online Episode 2 was better, but my nostalgia kind of just pulls me back to the first one.
Hmm.
Phantasy Star Online Episode 2 does have the first game stapled on top of it, um, but I didn't play the second game as much, and a lot of people didn't. They went back to the first levels.
Right.
So I think Episode 1 is
Yeah.
probably more relevant.
Fair.
The only thing I'd say Episode 2 had above Episode 1 was the fact that it was more levels and you could get to level 200 instead of 100, because that was a level cap on the first game.
Right.
But yeah, if you've never played that game before, I feel kind of sad because it's hard to play it these days. It's hard to find it.
Hmm.
There's like a private server somewhere on the PC that you can play it.
Right.
But other than that, it's really difficult to find. You'd have to pay a premium to get it on the Dreamcast.
Yes.
You'd have to pay a premium to get it on the GameCube, and I'm pretty sure the servers are down for both
Right.
because it used to be one of these ones that you'd pay a monthly subscription for,
Right.
and they called it a hunter's license because you were a hunter.
Yeah.
I remember my mum putting her credit card details into that for me. Good
Nice.
times.
Good times.
But yeah,
That's the first one on both our lists that one of us doesn't know so well. So I am not familiar at all. I've heard of the game,
yeah.
and I remember seeing it when I was younger, and I just never played it. Would that be like one of the earliest MMOs then?
It was. It was way back in the time when things like EverQuest and I think Warcraft was round about the same
Right.
time,
Okay.
so it was, and it was certainly one of the first action MMOs
Yeah.
because most MMOs were like press buttons and do skills, like Final
Yes.
Fantasy 14. This was not in that style. It was like you did combos to get things off.
Okay.
Um, you had little mags, which were wee robots that sat on your shoulder, and you'd feed them, and depending on what you fed them, they'd become different things.
All right.
So I always tried to feed mine so it became a wee fox
Nice.
because why not? But you could also get like the little kind of cows from Sonic Adventure.
All right.
Um,
Because it's a Sega game.
yeah, they had Sonic music in it as well. They had
Nice.
Sonic events.
All right.
The moderators, like the GMs that came in to ban you and stuff, or to say hello, they came in as Sonic characters. They came in as Sonic and Knuckles and stuff.
That's
Like,
amazing. So when you saw one of them, you're like, oh,
yeah, and something's going down.
gotta go.
Sometimes it was just like publicity, like they're coming on to say hello,
Oh,
how you
okay.
enjoying the game.
Yeah.
And one last point, before my throat gives it.
Yeah.
One last point, I would say the music is also fantastic in that game too. The opening theme is like you're watching a movie.
Nice.
It's like you're on this ship called the Pioneer 2, and you're trying to make contact with the Pioneer 1, which is like a little kind of building with humans in it down the ground.
Hmm.
I say humans, there's elves and stuff as well in there. But there's these like beams that kind of cross that obviously that helps them establish contact. So you send your wee beam out and they send their wee beam out. But when you send your beam out and they send their beam out and they cross, a monster appears and destroys like the Pioneer one, and you're like, the fuck,
I was
man.
going to say, never cross beams.
Yeah, so that's what happens when you cross beam,
Yeah.
folks.
Yeah.
But yeah, the reason that you're on this planet Regal is because humanity's fucked up their own planet and they're looking for another one.
Right.
And unfortunately, this planet has some beasties on it. So
There's a few wee beasties on it.
yeah,
That's cool. Yeah, it's probably one. I would have probably really enjoyed it had I played it, but I just never got around to it. So
yeah.
that's cool. Nice one.
So
Right.
is this the ultimate
This
number
is the
one?
ultimate.
I wonder what it's
This
going to
I
be.
know.
I can't even
So
imagine what it's
this is
going to
the
be.
thing. So that our top five lists, Mark and I didn't know. We didn't discuss before this. We didn't know what we were going to pick for any of the other four, but we both know our favorite
Yeah.
games. So this bit was always going to be the case. But so for me, drum roll, my favorite game of all time, and we all know it because we've played it on the channel. But it's Final Fantasy X.
What?
Oh my god!
No.
Again, similar to Kingdom Hearts 2, and a lot of the games on my list are because of the time when I played them. That's why they stick out for me in terms of nostalgia. But for me, Final Fantasy X sticks out for lots of reasons. It was at a time of my life where, like I say, I was really into my gaming and I was playing lots of these kinds of games. It was the PS2, so it was the first Final Fantasy game on the PS2, and I remember being so shocked that it had voice acting in it.
Mm,
I remember, in fact, I didn't have a PS2 when it was new, so I didn't get the game when it came out.
mm,
Um, I My first interaction with it was a friend of mine brought his PS2 over and we played it at my house. And that was like I was starting to play through, and I just remember like looking at him with like sheer amazement when Titus starts talking at the beginning. Listen to my story bit, and I was just like, oh my god, I can't believe this. Like obviously the leaps and bounds that it came in graphics. Like Final Fantasy has always been for cutscenes at least,
mm,
like some of my favorite, like the top graphics you can get.
mm.
Like it's still to this day, Final Fantasy games, no matter what you think of them, they still look fucking amazing. The graphics are just incredible, and Final Fantasy X obviously stepped it up again as being the first one on the Final Fantasy. I was going to say there, first one on the PS2. It just obviously stepped up the game from the PS1. Even just the regular in-game graphics had been improved, but the cutscenes themselves were so amazing. Fell in love with all of the characters. It's just got such a diverse cast of amazing, different, people like in it. Whereas some of the other games, like Final Fantasy IX was my first Final Fantasy game, and I love that to death as well. But okay, yeah, the characters are different, but they're all kind of humanoid, and
I know
And
why you prefer Final Fantasy X because you get to ride the shoe puff in Final Fantasy X.
exactly, I mean, things like that never happened in the other games because you didn't have voice acting and
I thought because you didn't have shoe
you didn't
puffs.
have shoe buffs either. So I mean, people have a go at the voice acting in Final Fantasy X specific for the ha 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 bit. You know, like it's a big meme, but it's iconic. It's so
Apparent,
funny, and it was meant to be that way.
well, apparently the Japanese versions is almost exactly the same.
Is that right?
Yeah, I watched it the other day.
Oh, that's excellent.
So yeah, people were all like, "Oh, yeah, it wouldn't be like that in the Japanese version." It's actually almost exactly like that in
Well,
the
there you go.
Japanese version.
See, I mean, it was supposed to be that way, and it's just it comes across as being awkward because it is an awkward situation. But oh, I just love it. I love the love story. I mean, I'm a bit of a sucker for these types of things. The romance between Titus and Yuna, and even Waka and Lulu have a bit of a thing, obviously going on in 10.
You can
And
tell there's a wee bit of a dirty one though. Is it?
yeah, I mean, just so likable. All the characters have got such cool stories to them. Seymour is, I mean, such a good baddie. He's such a good baddie. From the beginning of the game, he doesn't seem like he's a baddie, but there's something up with him. He's a bit strange, you know. As it goes on, he's a bit more sinister. He just plays the role so well as this like smug, smarmy guy, and just you love to hate him. You love to hate him. He's so good. Some of the best music in the series. You know, his theme, Seymour's theme, progresses as you fight him. You know, the different forms he takes, the music changes, and it's just so good. I'm getting flustered just talking about it. I just love it so much. The best minigame of all time. Like I'm not taking any arguments. The best minigame of all time is Blitzball. It's woven into the story. The main character is a Blitzball player. You learn about all this, but you can actually play the game, and it's so much fun to play. It's all the different teams you can play. You can meet characters in the game that you can recruit for your team, and it's just so much fun.
I love that. I'm not taking
I'm
arguments
not
this
taking any
time.
arguments this time. Like this is it. It's the best. I'm not like you can argue in the comments all you like, but I'm not taking it. And to put a final, I think final nail in this coffin because I could talk about it so much. But to wrap this up, another point I will not allow arguments on. It's the best cutscene of all time. Is the section where Titus is in the Blitzball arena in Zanarkand and the
Yeah, I was.
first sighting of
I've
Sin.
watched
It's
that more than a few times. To be
absolutely
fair,
with not just the scene itself, but
the
the
music.
best music
Yeah.
in the background. The fact that Orin's there, like saluting Sin with his gourd.
Yeah.
It's so, and they're playing
And that
playing
obviously has a
Blitzball.
meaning that you don't really know
Exactly,
about
you have
until
no
later on.
idea
Why
until later on
it's
why it's like that. It's so good, so well written, so well set out. It just sets the scene so well for what you're about to experience. And it's just such a great story arc for all the characters. I just love it so much. And one of the best level progression systems. I think the Sphere Grid is far a vast improvement on traditional level ups. But that's for the debate section. So Final Fantasy X, best game of all time.
well.
Well, actually,
I hate to contradict you on that one,
yes,
but I guess it's time for my
it sure is.
final
Your final
decision.
final
So
fantasy.
yeah,
Uh,
speaking of which, mine is I'm sure you'll be really surprised at this. The original version of Final Fantasy VII.
Dear God, I didn't see that coming.
So a little bit of background story before I tell you why it's so good. I started off my gaming experience like with my own console with I think the PlayStation One. No, hang on, the Dreamcast was my first console. The PlayStation One was one of my first consoles. So I had a little, I think, 12-inch TV, maybe a 9-inch TV, black and white. I started off with that in mono with Final Fantasy VII, and it wasn't even like the official version of the game. 'Cause it was back in the times when piracy was like one of these things that was constantly rife.
Yeah,
Um, but eventually, I got the official version of the game. I then got a color TV. It was a SCART lead that made it into color.
yep.
I got a SCART lead. I then got a stereo system, and this was whilst I was playing through Final Fantasy VII,
Right.
so everything just got really like that much better.
Yep.
And that's before I even tell you why I enjoy the game. Final Fantasy VII, like most Final Fantasy games, has a superb soundtrack. Like I would say that I've listened to Final Fantasy themes more than I've listened to any other music, not just Final Fantasy music, any other music. The combat, the turn-based combat that's in Final Fantasy VII, much like in Final Fantasy X, is I think it's my preference when it comes to Final Fantasy games. Being able to take your time, pick what you're going to do, like whether you're going to use magic, attack, summon. You actually get to plan what you're doing, and to me, that's some of the most interesting combat you can have. Some of the most satisfying combat you can have. Final Fantasy VII's storyline as well was fantastic. You started off as a mercenary, helping like a group of kind of like what we're seeing as terrorists, basically, but they were trying to save the planet. And you had this organization called Shinra that were basically trying to frame you for being terrorists rather than obviously what you're doing, saving the planet. They're using Mako energy, which basically destroys the planet, and your job is as a mercenary is to help Avalanche, which are this group, to destroy the Mako reactor in the
Yep.
first act. Um, Without completely going through the full story, that's the opening chapter. You think the bad guys are like the Shinra at this point, but it's just that's not even it. Like you
Mm.
get like maybe hours and hours into the game, and you realize there's an even better enemy in there, like big man himself,
The big man.
Sephiroth,
Yes.
one of the most iconic bad guys of all time.
Yep.
Also in Kingdom Hearts,
Yes.
um, also in Smash Brothers now. um, he starts like he comes into it like having impaled the guy that you thought was the boss of the game, or like the boss, like they could have been the boss of the game, like the president of Shinra, with a giant samurai sword that no man should be able to wield because it's bigger than most people. Um, your first appearance, like that, your first encounter with that is just seeing that scene, like a guy with a sword on him. Um, yeah, so it's like it's almost like you're filled with dread at that point. And you're like, what the fuck is this guy? As the game goes on, and you find out a bit about his past, you find out he wasn't always this badass, this crazy villain. He was normal until he realized that he was created, that he was technically a monster. He loses his mind, and then like the rest of the game is just his um, really descent into madness. He finds out that like the his planet, like his people, his ancestors, originally like basically owned the planet, or like were the kind of protectors of the planet, and the people that like you are, like Cloud and everything, came in and took it away from them. So he's using that as his justification for basically killing everybody. Um, and yeah, so that's basic. That's the story. That's part of the story. But there's other. Every character has a unique story as well. Yuffie has a unique story. Barrett has a unique story. I could go on for hours talking about all of them. I won't because I've just gone over like the main story and the villain a little bit.
Yep.
Um, the game has so much to do in regards to you've got mini games. You've got like the wee kind of snowboarding mini game, which is pretty fun. Or it was back when it came out.
Yeah.
I did try and play it recently, and it wasn't as fun. The motorbike game everyone remembers as being super fun. I love that game. I love the music in the background. I would say Blitzball and those games are probably for me tied because I guess strong nostalgia. But the motorbike game definitely like one of my favorite games. I enjoyed playing it.
Mhm.
The remake, I don't know if it did it justice.
Mm.
But yeah, I'll not talk about the
We'll not
remake
talk
because
about it.
that's a different
It's a
game.
different kettle of fish.
Yeah. Yeah, and you've got all your kind of side bosses and stuff as well. I know you didn't touch on the Final Fantasy X side bosses, but much like Final Fantasy X, you've got like weapons, which are like side bosses. You've got like side quests. You can do chocobo breeding to get like the ultimate chocobo. You can get materia that's like hidden you wouldn't normally be able to get. When I first went through the game, I fought the boss with nowhere near the best materia, and it took me hours to beat him because he has a huge health bar if you don't have specific materia. Um, The materia system as well. You were talking about the sphere grid.
Yep.
I would say I prefer the materia system because you can level up your materia, get it to max. You can use more spells as a result, more powerful spells, and then you can like basically breed it so you can put it onto another person as well. I think it's really cool. I think it's really unique. I can understand why you like Sphere Grid, and I like the Sphere Grid as well. But I would say for me, the Materia's got a slight edge because you can equip it to your weapons and stuff to give it a specific element as well. You can equip it to your armor to give yourself resistances. Like there's just so much you can do with it, and it's a. I wouldn't necessarily say it's objectively better. I would say it's probably a preference.
Yep.
Both of them have their strengths.
Yes.
For me, I think I just prefer Materia. But yeah, Final Fantasy VII, fantastic music, fantastic story. It's the whole package for me.
Hmm.
Um, Nostalgia value is through the roof as well. We're still getting stuff from Final Fantasy VII today, like remake and all the rest of it. Side games, like remake of side games. It's amazing, and I can see why it's still popular.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, seven is the standout in the series for sort of pop culture. You know,
Hmm.
it's the one when you say Final Fantasy, it's the one that people will probably think of.
Well, that or six, apparently.
That or six. Okay. Yeah, well, this is a debate. Within the Final Fantasy community, there's a big debate over which is the favorite game. But what I would argue is that if you were to say Final Fantasy to someone who wasn't necessarily a Final Fantasy fan, they would think of seven first.
Yeah.
That's what I meant. Iconic wise, like nobody, no, just regular Joe knows any of the characters from Final Fantasy Six, but everybody knows who Cloud is, and everyone who knows who Sephiroth is. They just stand out as iconic characters in the series and kind of gaming in general.
And I think part of the reason for that is they spend a lot of time on those
Yeah,
characters at once, but with Final Fantasy VI, they splinter off into different characters quite
yeah,
frequently.
yeah,
You don't get a long time with one character, you get some time with one character, some time with another character. I felt it was kind of jarring in a way, which
yeah,
is why I wouldn't rate it above 7,
yeah.
but I can understand why other people would because it's still a really good game.
Yes.
It's still got a really good story. It's really dark actually,
Mm.
from what I played.
Right, we
Um,
need to be careful here because now we're talking about games that aren't on our
yeah,
lists, so
yeah,
that's not what we're here to do. Final Fantasy VII, I love that game as well. I think that the fact that I didn't play it when it was new and I went back to it much later maybe hindered my experience of it, or maybe meant that I didn't like it as much as most people did. But I still love it. It's really good. It also like brought the bar up
hmm,
significantly because you went from the SNES to the PS1.
yeah.
You know, the 3D graphics. Like
Proper music.
you can look back on it now and laugh because it's all triangles
Yeah,
and blocks. But for its time, it was iconic. It was cutting edge. And just by listening to what you were talking about going into the in depth, it just made me realize all the stuff I didn't say about Final Fantasy X.
yeah.
That I could have talked about how I preferred the turn-based combat in Final Fantasy X. I could have
Mm,
talked about how I loved the summons because you actually got to control them, whereas in the older games they all just came out and did their attack and then left again.
yeah.
I didn't even mention any of that. We could sit here and talk about Final Fantasy forever.
Hmm.
But we've run out of time. That is all we've got time for. We have given you our top five lists. Let us know in the comments what you think.
Give us your top five.
Yeah, let us know your top five in the comments. Were any of your favorite games on our lists? Do you completely disagree? Do you agree? Let us know why. Thank you very much for watching. This was fun. If you liked it, let us know by giving us a like and letting us know in the comments. And we can maybe think about doing similar videos like this in the future. It's definitely a different kind of video and it's a much longer video than we're not used to doing. But
Yeah.
thanks for watching if you have made it this far. And we'll see you next time for something else.
Something else.